guys, Josh here from thebitblock.com with our video review for Metroid Other M on the Wii. So, with this game, Nintendo is focusing very strongly on the story and giving us more insight in terms of who Samus Aran is as a person, and so story is a very strong concept in Other M. And then they're also focusing a lot more on action, and so you're going to be blowing up a lot more aliens, and it's much faster paced than past Metroid games. So, we've got a stronger focus on story with a lot of very epic cutscenes. You know, you're going to be blowing up a whole lot more aliens. It's sounding really good so far, so let's jump into the full review and get a better idea in terms of what Metroid Other M has to offer. So, Other M is a much faster game than past Metroids. It focuses more heavily on blasting away aliens and dodging their attacks. Now, that's not really a bad thing, especially because the stronger focus on action is really intense and satisfying. However, the run-and-gun gameplay seems to kind of overshadow what we expect from Metroid, which is a whole lot of well-designed exploration. You know, spending time trying to figure out how to get to the next area, or maybe rolling through a very elaborate morph ball puzzle. Other M does feature exploration and puzzle solving, but not as much as past games, and most of the challenges really do involve taking down enemies. It's usually very clear where you're supposed to go next. Surprisingly enough, the simplified controls work really well here. Just hold the Wii Remote on its side, kind of classic NES game style. Move around with the D-pad, jump with the 2 button, shoot with 1, and as long as you're looking towards an enemy, the shot will hit them, so there's a little bit of auto-aim going on here. And then you can press the A button to transform into the morph ball. Now, the D-pad movement is not as precise as what an analog stick would be, obviously, but honestly, it works pretty well, and it's actually more smooth than I thought it would be. You can also pull off these really epic dodge moves by tapping in any direction on the D-pad just before you're about to be attacked. And seriously, when the combat heats up and you're dodging all over the place, you definitely start feeling like a badass. You can also get a better view of your surroundings by pointing the Wii Remote at your TV screen to view the world through the eyes of Samus. Now, you cannot actually move around when you're in the first-person view, but you can fire your weapon, shoot missiles, and even examine objects like doors or switches. As you progress through the game, Samus of course gains access to more and more upgrades for her suit, such as the speed boosters, there's also of course the super missiles and the screw attack, and so on. Combining the third and first-person gameplay is a key aspect to Metroid Other M, and personally, I think it works out really well. Alright, so Metroid Other M is a great looking game. It may not look as artistically impressive as the Metroid Prime games, but it definitely has its share of eye candy. Other M is filled with atmospherical hallways and rooms that showcase reflections, bump mapping, and many lighting effects. There are also even some little extra graphical touches that you'll find if you're looking hard enough. The special effects and particles in the game are really impressive. Blasting away enemies and watching as goo and sparks splatter everywhere is very pretty and makes the combat that much more enjoyable. I do have one gripe though about the game's visuals, and it's not so much the quality of what we see, but the actual locations that we're playing in. So, you got your basic space stations, an outdoor plant-like area, a desert section, but none of them really jump out at you in their design. They're not too original, and they don't really give off that wow feeling of some of the areas in the Metroid Prime games, such as, in Metroid Prime 1 there was the Phendrana Drifts, in 2, the Sanctuary, and then in Metroid Prime 3, Skytown. All of those particular locations were really gorgeous in the way that they were designed, and kind of, what we wouldn't expect from a Metroid Prime game. They were really original. Sadly, Metroid Other M doesn't really have any particular location like those. Nevertheless though, as you can see from the footage here, it's a great looking game. I just personally wish there was a little bit more creativity in the level design. The soundtrack to Metroid Other M is pretty subtle. In fact, there's probably next to no way any of this music is going to get stuck in your head. Having said that, though, the soundtrack does do a really good job of adding to the game's atmosphere in its simplicity, which is exactly what it should do. You know, while wandering through areas, you'll hear mostly slow, subtle notes. But when the action becomes intense and you're about to take down a boss, the music kicks in, it gets fast-paced, and it gets you really fired up. The voice acting in the game is not too bad either. Characters will sometimes deliver really painfully cheesy lines.
Remember me?
Hey, Pop! Don't you know how to treat a lady?
But for the most part, I didn't personally find any of the voice acting to be terrible. Much of the time we hear the inner monologue of Samus, which does come off as kind of sounding robotic. However, I'm pretty sure that's the intention. A very large focus of Metroid Other M is obviously dealing with the game's story, which centers around giving the player more insight into Samus Aran as a person, and, you know, not just some kick-ass robotic bounty hunter. Without going into too many spoilers, the basic plot involves Samus responding to a distress call. When she arrives at the location, she meets up with the Galactic Federation Army, and then joins them in investigating the ship.
Samus, looks like I'm gonna need to ask for your cooperation on this mission. But I'm also gonna have to ask that you follow my commands.
Oddly enough, my favorite part about the game's story is actually Ridley and how he comes into play. And yeah, I know that saying Ridley is in the game is a spoiler, but you should have assumed that he would drop in at some point, right? I won't go into details, but personally, I found it really cool to see how Other M handles Ridley's role in the game's story. Nevertheless, though, the cutscenes do look really good, very high quality, and learning more about Samus as a person and seeing that she's not just some mindless robot kicking ass is a welcome change to her character. Alright, so in the end, I kind of feel like Metroid Other M is a very good game. It might not be great, but it is absolutely good. You know, running around and blasting aliens is very satisfying and a ton of fun, and I could pretty much do that all day. But there are certain aspects of Other M that just don't feel as polished as they probably should have been. For example, the story is good, it's not by any means bad, but it's not great. And I feel like since the story is such a main focus of Metroid Other M, it probably should have been great. And like I mentioned earlier, the game's design in terms of what you're doing is not as clever as Metroid Prime games were, or even Super Metroid, for example. It just doesn't make you think as much, and there's a little bit too much focus on action. Like I said, I love it, but I would have liked there to be more areas where I feel like I'm there, like it's very atmospherical, and I don't know what to do next. I have to spend maybe 30 minutes figuring out how to open up a door or something. There's really no particular areas that are like that in Metroid Other M. However, even with my complaints, it still does manage to be a very good game. It's lots of fun to play, and I absolutely suggest you guys check it out.